For centuries, one tribe's name spread fear across the Caribbean. A 1,000-year-old skull from the Bahamas survived that history, and in 2020, scientists finally examined it and exposed a far more disturbing truth. They were called the Caribs, a tribe so feared that entire villages would abandon their homes at just the rumor they were coming. They started in Venezuela and spent centuries moving north through the Caribbean, island by island, leaving a trail of destroyed communities behind them. By the time Columbus arrived in 1492, their reputation had already spread across the entire region. Columbus had been sent out by Europe to explore these islands, and Europe genuinely believed monsters were out there, giants and other mythical creatures from legend, all things from medieval folklore. He had Taino guides with him who had navigated him across thousands of miles of open ocean without a single moment of hesitation. But when his fleet approached one specific island, those same guides went completely silent and begged Columbus not to go ashore. What could possibly be on that island? Columbus listened and sailed past. He kept notes of everything he saw, and when he finally wrote back to the Spanish crown, he told them something that surprised everyone. He had found no monsters, no giants, nothing from legend, but in that very same letter, he offered to deliver them as many slaves as they wanted. The deeper I researched, the more insane this story became. But first, we need to understand why the Caribs were so feared, because it was that fear that made everything else that follows possible. Around 800 AD, groups began moving north from the Orinoco region into the Caribbean. This was not one single invasion. It was a long process over centuries, island by island, generation by generation. By the late 1400s, communities across the region already knew who they were. In many accounts, people described night raids, fast war canoes, and poisoned arrows. Whether every detail is literal or magnified by fear, one thing is clear: the reputation was enormous. You did not have to see them. You only had to hear the stories. Now here is the detail that changes everything. You've said this word your whole life, cannibal. But originally that word meant something very different to what we know it as today. The Kalinago word for themselves was Caribna. It meant, I am a person. Columbus heard it, wrote it down wrong, and passed it to Europe. And somewhere along the way, the meaning flipped completely. Their word for I am a person became the world's word for I eat people. Same root, opposite meaning, and once that word existed, everything changed. And this is where the story gets even crazier, because one mistranslated word destroyed an entire population. But it brings us to one very important question. So, did they actually eat people? The hard truth is, the evidence is disputed. Most early claims are second-hand, often from enemy groups or later colonial writers. Some scholars argue there may have been small-scale ritual practices in warfare contexts. Others argue the cannibal image was propaganda used to justify violence and enslavement. Physical proof is limited and contested. But what we do know is that in 1528, a famous Italian explorer rowed ashore on a Caribbean island while his crew watched from the ship. His name was Giovanni da Verrazzano, one of the most celebrated explorers of his age. The Caribs were waiting when he came ashore. According to his brother's account, they killed him on that beach and ate him while the crew watched helplessly from the water. Historians still debate whether it happened exactly like that, but it spread across Europe immediately. The cannibal story stopped being something that happened to people far away. It was now something that could happen to a famous European explorer in broad daylight. Once that story spread, fear became policy fuel, which made Columbus's earlier letters even more dangerous in hindsight. Columbus had found cannibals, or at least that is what he called them. He hadn't found the mythical monsters Europe expected, so he replaced them with something far more useful: real people, with a real label. And that label made everything legal to enslave an entire population. In 1503, Queen Isabella signed a law protecting every indigenous person in the Americas from slavery. One sentence carved out the exception: cannibals were not protected. That was it. Every tribe that fought back was suddenly cannibal. Every village that fled was full of cannibals. The law meant to protect them became the weapon that destroyed them. One law, one word, that's all it took. And what happened next was even worse for the Caribs. In 1492, the Bahamas had tens of thousands of people living across dozens of islands. 20 years later, Spanish explorers found them completely empty. So where did everyone go? Simply put, the Spanish took them. Every single one. The entire population rounded up and shipped to Hispaniola for forced labour in the mines. The justification every single time? Cannibal. Most of them had never seen a Carib in their lives. It didn't matter, look at the numbers. Hispaniola had over 1 million people in 1492. By 1520 there were 32,000 left. By 1550 fewer than 500. Puerto Rico, Jamaica, island after island. Disease killed many, but the slave raids turned catastrophe into extinction. And through all of it, the Caribs themselves kept fighting. Spanish, French, British, Dutch, every European empire came for them. For nearly 200 years they held every single one of them off. So what finally broke them? Which brings us back to that skull. In 2020, scientists scanned a 1,000-year-old skull found in the Bahamas. For years, historians assumed Columbus had exaggerated, that Caribs never reached the northern Caribbean. The skull ended that argument. The bone structure matched Carib remains from South America. The cranial flattening was right there. They had reached the Bahamas by 1000 AD. Columbus wasn't lying about where they were, but here is what the skull did not show. Not a single cut mark. No human remains in cooking vessels. No physical proof of cannibalism. Columbus was right about the people. We still cannot prove he was right about what they did. These people held off every European empire for nearly 200 years. Then one man died and it was over. For years he held together the last organised Carib resistance on St. Vincent. The Spanish never broke them. The French never broke them. The British tried for decades. In 1795 they sent a soldier to negotiate. Chatoyer met him. There was a fight. Chatoyer was killed. The resistance collapsed almost immediately. Within a year, the British had rounded up over 5,000 people. Caribs mixed with escaped African slaves, known as the Garifuna, loaded them onto ships and exiled them to Central America. The Garifuna rebuilt. Today, roughly 300,000 of their descendants live across Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala with their own language and culture. UNESCO recognized them in 2001. They are still here, and so are the Kalinago. On Dominica right now, there are around 3,000 direct descendants of the island Caribs. In 2015, they officially dropped the name Carib. They had always been Kalinago. Carib was Columbus's word, a label they never gave themselves. So were the Caribs cannibals? Maybe in a small ritual sense. Almost certainly not the way history recorded it. But here is what we know for certain. One word written by a man who never witnessed what he was describing was used to enslave and kill millions across an entire region. The most dangerous thing Columbus brought to the Caribbean wasn't a ship. It wasn't a weapon. It was a word. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe to Buried Earth if you enjoyed the video. On screen right now, 2 videos we think you're gonna absolutely love.